See, can you hear me? Let me.
How we doing? Can you hear me now?
Yes, I can. There we go.
Perfect.
Yeah,
How you
man.
doing, man?
Good. Good to see you. Thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, my pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, man. And ladies and gentlemen, Bill Jones. But I don't really know how we became connected on social media. I just think I tuned into that you were a fellow jujitsu guy, and at some point I befriended you on Facebook like several years ago, and then I followed you and kind of liked a bunch of the posts you made, and you've commented on some of my posts, and are in some of the same groups. So here we are.
Yeah, we live in a small world, right? It's funny, like even our most popular figures in jujitsu are, relatively unknown anywhere else. So uh, it's just a small world.
True that. And it was funny because I believe that it was you. Recently I attended a Pedro Sauer seminar, maybe like 6 months ago or something. But it was the first one I had done, and I think you commented, or it was either you or Ari Nazan, because kind of in my recollection, you both commented like, "Oh, first time," like is like the James Franco on the gallows meme is what I took from that, the mental image. But
Yeah, Pedro blows minds. Like people don't like he just moves differently. And his understanding is just it's off the charts.
well, and he's such a personable and kind person, even though he told us a story at the end that convinced us that he was once the worst guy ever. He told us this hilarious story about like when he first started training with Grandmaster Elio in Brazil, and just kind of convinced the whole room that at one point he was a hellion, and that his mom was like all worried about him learning jujitsu because of how mean he was already, and it was just a great story. I just the whole seminar, he came and worked with me and my student I brought with me, talked to us for 10 minutes before the seminar. Like it that there were so many parts outside of the seminar. It was great information, but man, what a guy, a special person.
Yeah, very special. He's brought a lot to jujitsu. He's a pioneer, especially in America. In my state, Ohio, I mean, he has so many affiliates here. It's crazy. So there's a lot of Ohio that just wouldn't have jujitsu if it wasn't for him.
Hey, okay, sidebar before we talk more about Pedro Sauer. The front man of my favorite band of all time is from Ohio, Widespread Panic. I don't know if you've heard of them.
I haven't.
Yes, but the lead singer, who's on the wall in a couple of different spots in this place, John Bell. He's from Ohio. I forget whereabouts, but yeah, great place. A lot of history too. Um, I'm a historian on the side outside of this martial arts academy. I teach college, so
Okay. What do you teach? You said history?
yeah, right now I'm teaching Survey US. That's what I've been teaching. I taught full time for 5 years and taught US and World, like World Civ and US 1 and 2, and Arkansas history. So
Wow. Okay.
history. And then this course I'm doing now is like a combined, like it does the whole US history in one semester. From like
Yeah,
founding.
that's a lot to unravel in one semester.
Dude, I know it is difficult. And I'm kind of happy I do it online, the way I do it, because I can like put podcasts and lecture videos and just really mix up the stuff I put on there for them. But it's because it can be overwhelming, man. Just me as a historian, I'm like looking at all for like the whole, just from like the Civil War to now, is just the U.S. history two piece traditionally,
Oh yeah.
and that's the part of the semester I'm in, and I'm just like I'm between the Depression and World War II right now, and I'm just like, man, we are moving at lightning speed. It's normally I would have been somewhere around like the Texas Revolution if I was just doing US 1,
Sure.
but yeah, I've moved all the way to getting on the German unification conversation and lead up to World War II.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah. So since you love history, have you read any Robert Drysdale and the history of jiu-jitsu and stuff like that?
Oh, actually, yes. Great question. I've read Open and Close Guard probably 15 times. Like my actual physical copy is worn out.
Oh
Just
wow.
yeah. I'm going to, the same gym that had uh Master Shower is having Robert Drysdale May 5th, and I'm going to go to that seminar. So I've never trained with him, but I've talked to him at events a couple of different times, and I was at Masters Worlds this last time, and I just finished his second book on the plane, and for the first time, and I've probably done that one about 10 times. I definitely like the first one more. Um, but man, what a great those interviews, and the fact that many of those red belts, and then also the Japanese interviews. There's several from those interviews, like Murata, who I cited in my master's thesis in 2015, who was the curator of the Kodokan Museum. He died during the pandemic. So, like, several of those red belts, if not all, I think. I was looking back, almost every person he interviewed that was up in age has passed away since.
Yeah, it's crazy. I went to Brazil in 2019, and I'm lucky to have met Alvaro Barreto, who I think he interviews Alvaro Barreto. I
Yeah.
actually got he said, does any, Pedro Sauer brought him in. Pedro Sauer goes there every year, does a camp, and brought him in. And I was like, man, this is blowing my mind, because he's one of like the few people that was like, I would really love to meet this guy before I die. And of course, he doesn't speak any English, and that's okay. We spoke jujitsu, and he was like, does anybody have a question? And I look around and I'm like, nobody's going to ask this man a question. And so mine was just generic, like, how do you like to pass the guard? What's your favorite way? And so he like came down, and his son was my uke, and like talked me through a stack pass, the way he likes to do stack pass. And like, it was like this little 5 minute kind of private lesson on passing the guard, and just having him in there. That, I mean, so much history that guy has seen. I wish I had the ability to communicate with him better and actually have just sat there and talked to him. But yeah, I feel like Robert Drysdale really did a great thing for jujitsu, at least, in just clarifying the history. Because look, I mean, we all love the romanticized version of, this guy was too small to actually do anything, and then, but like, that is the history of every single martial art I've ever heard. Like, I've been studying since I was 4 years old, and it's all been about some guy who was too small and too weak, and then discovered this martial art. And it's like very cliche, and it's like, I mean, I don't mean to call those stories bullshit, but they're not that interesting, you
Well,
know. And
it's like the archetypal mythological story. And so,
yeah,
somebody that Drysdale interviews in Open and Close Guard, and it's one of the historians. I think it's Kairos, Jose Tufi Kairos, but it may be Luis Otavio Leidner also. But anyway, that he talks about the myth of creation, in relation. So, like, as a historian, I'm like, oh yes, we have this conversation in every ancient civilization, So it's like, but when you start looking, I mean, it's like almost like the Epic of Gilgamesh is how I look at it. It's like, when I teach that, I teach it like it's Step Brothers, the movie. I'm like, these two dudes, they're bros now. Like, this is Will Ferrell and John C. Riley, right? Like, Kidu and Gilgamesh. But it's that sort of like manifestation of the archetypal hero myth, savior. Like, there's a lot of those archetypes that line up if you start looking at the origin stories of anything. And my specialty, like on my master's degree, was looking at martial arts as a continually reinvented tradition, right? It's something that we saw it in the modern era get reinvented over and over and over, like all around the same time. All of these styles came into being, but it was a reinvention of an earlier style.
yeah.
So,
But I
but
mean, you even see it in smaller versions, in cycles throughout my training. And I've been doing Brazilian jiu-jitsu for 20 years now. But uh, like I said, I've been training since 1980. I don't know, whenever the Karate Kid came out. I started training. Like, my mom almost immediately put me into karate classes. And you just see like cycles of things coming into being, and then being reinvented, as you put it, and then coming around again. My joke is like, one day, 10 years from now, one of my students is going to come up and be like, hey, have you ever seen this thing? You can put two hands into a collar and like choke somebody by their neck. And I'll be like, no, show me that, like, and like the way the leg locks are all being, and I think they're more systematic than I ever saw them for sure. But like, these aren't anything new. Guys have been doing them in catch wrestling for years, and maybe it's their way of communicating that. But like, they get mad when they see people getting popular for teaching something they've seen for 100 years now. But
That
yeah,
is
you see that cycle, and it's like, well, what if we just broke their leg instead? Stay away from their arms, and it's not, and it's like, it's interesting to see that, and then on the macro scale, like how the stories of how these martial arts came to be, are all like kind of the same story, and they all align. They're all like you said, they're archetypical mythology. But I like that. I also think I think there's value in that as well. But I think there's a lot of value in just seeing what really happened. Like I tell my guys, I'm like, look, don't take it as like a personal dig. All he's doing is seeing what happened. He's just curious. Like the name Jacinto Farrow would be lost to time if it wasn't for Robert Drysdale. And like, I think that's not good. Like it's no different than like I have several black belts under me who teach at my academy. And if any of my students were to be like, I'm a Bill Jones black belt, but not at least mention, I also train with like Kendall Gage and Logan Higley and all these guys that are there. It's like, you gotta, they're part of that journey that makes up my school, top level martial arts, like they're just as important as I am. And just like I have a YouTube channel. It's very small, but one of the things I do is called Professor's Corner. And at the beginning, every single time, I'm a black belt under Master Pedro Sauer and Tony Rinaldi. I made sure that like, even though it'd be easy for me to say I'm a Master Pedro Sauer black belt because he tied it on, like Tony Rinaldi, I owe that guy everything. And it was a different age then. I don't think that Carlos and those guys were trying to cover anything up so much. Uh, it's also a very Japanese way to do things. Is like this was Mitsuyo Mieda was the master of that academy. That's who you're under, right? Jacinto Farah might have been teaching there or whatever, but you're a Mitsuyo Mieda student. And I think it's just how things were done. It's just a different way to look at it.
well, yeah.
I'm sorry, took us off on a
No, no,
tangent.
no. This is great, great conversation, and I think that's why you get the Luis França. You get some other lineages that go back to which there's been, and Drysdale brought this out, evidence that Franza fought, or a Luis Franza, it could have been a different guy. He even brings that up. Fought under the Gracie Academy, and brings out a couple of sources for that. But there are these other lineage. Oh well, Mario Lacio even like, oh, I trained with Maeda, and oh, I also trained with Sada Miyako. So there, it's interesting how these lineages sprang up, but probably they were doing some version of the same thing that you just mentioned. Is how I
Yeah,
interpret it, right? Like there
yeah,
was probably some loose connection there. And maybe out of all of the connections, Carlos and Donato Pierce dos Reis, maybe they had the stronger of the connections. Makes sense.
sure.
It's interesting too. Barreto, Joao Alberto,
Yeah.
he his father-in-law trained at the Maeda Dojo in Beilin,
Oh
which is
wow.
interesting. And that's mentioned as a total aside in the Drysdale book, but I've chased down that source. And Barreto, he talks about it in several different sources, in like who his father-in-law was and what the role was, and like his father-in-law knew Carlos's dad. So it ties in a lot of things that, and with Drysdale, he's making an inquiry. He's doing what historians do, and that is not. I mean, he does a really good job about finding answers, and you can tell over time throughout the book, things change for him, and he even talks about that, right? Like
Yeah,
he the narrative he had in his mind changed because he found information that was like, oh, okay, well, let's see that
yeah. And
differently, a more complete picture, whatever.
I think if anything, like the guys who like, I don't know. Again, like I think you can allow a narrative to change, right? If you thought of like Elio and Carlos as these like guys who created this whole thing, and you read the books and you start to get, and it's real easy to see now. They didn't really create anything new, right? But like, I think Robert does a really good job of saying what their real strength was that when the pressure of judo came in to say, hey, join judo, join the Kodokan, kind of get with the pack here, go to the Olympics, do all that kind of stuff. They said, nah, I think we're just going to do our own thing and we're going to keep doing what we're doing. And, that's your road less traveled, right? That's your Robert Frost right there. It is because of that. We have the UFC. We have Brazilian Jiu Jitsu in America. Otherwise, it would just be judo. And frankly, I mean, I love judo, but like nobody knows about judo. You try to find judo when it's on during the Olympics. No one watches it unless you're probably in Japan or whatever. But like, it would be lost and it would just be it'd just be judo, and it wouldn't be trained as much as it is now. And I'm not really the biggest fan of the way the Gracies came into America, but there's no arguing that it worked, just saying, hey, we'll fight anybody. Let's go, and it worked. And
Have you read Worth
I think
Defending, like Richard Bressler's story? Are you familiar with that at all?
no, I don't know. No.
He is actually interviewed in Drysdale's second book, but
Okay.
he was Horian's first student, 1978. I did a private with him, like it's been like 6 weeks ago or 2 months. We were out training with Hickson and Howder and trained with Richard Bressler. But Scott Burr, who edited Open and Close Guard, and he's writing a book on Howder's life, wrote this book about Richard Bressler. It is a really good, if you like audiobooks, or I got a physical copy too. And it's like a draw you in. I listened to the whole thing in one sitting. While I was traveling back from the first time I went out and worked with Hickson, I heard about it and I listened to the whole thing on the way home. But he talks about those challenges, is what like those, and like going with Horian, doing exactly what you just mentioned. Like, hey, we're here to show that your martial art is not as good as ours.
Yeah,
Who's your
it's
number
crazy.
one guy?
Isn't it? It's
Yes, it's
nuts.
so crazy. That is so and ballsy. Wow, like that's some
Yeah.
moxie right there.
And what I love about it is it's created this culture in jujitsu of like cross training, and it's not necessarily for the same reason anymore. But like, I tell my students all the time, you're going on vacation, take your gi, take your rash guard, and find a place and train. Like that's what we do. And if you've ever been in traditional martial arts, karate, you don't do that in karate. Like you can't just walk into a school and say, "Yeah, I'm in for the week. Can I train here?" They're gonna be like, "No, man. Like you can't do that." And it's at least that's how it was for many, many, many years. Like you just didn't do that.
Yeah,
And
I is it was like that a little bit even when I first got involved, but like that is since I've been involved, and particularly since I've owned a school, which is 12 years now. Um, that's changed. Like
yeah,
even the first parts of me on the school, I owned a school a little bit as a colored belt even, but I didn't come up in the traditional martial arts. I got more into traditional martial arts after starting MMA. But it's funny you mentioned like you come from the Karate Kid generation, right? Like
yeah,
there are these definitive lines of demarcation, or however you want to describe it, markers where it's like, okay, Karate Kid, Chuck Norris. But my era was Forrest Griffin, Stephen Bonner.
oh yeah,
That was like the year I
what a fun
graduated
era.
high school, and there was an MMA gym like right down the street from my house. I started training there. So,
Funny story about that fight. And about that season of because that was the first season of Ultimate Fighter, if I remember
yep,
correctly.
yep.
And like I said, I've been training a long time, and before I got into Brazilian Jiu Jitsu, I trained Aiki Jiu Jitsu a lot, we did some fighting under something called the IJF, the International Jiu Jitsu
Hmm.
Federation. So don't confuse that with the IBJJF or anything like that. But it's kind of like MMA light, right? So you punch, you kick, but once you get a hold of each other, it basically becomes a judo match. And once you hit the ground, it basically becomes a grappling match for about 25 to 30 seconds. It's kind of at the ref's discretion, but much closer to how judo does things than how Brazilian Jiu Jitsu does things. The reason I bring that up, I was at a camp in Wisconsin, and one of my friends there, he's like, "Hey, come over to my house. I've got Pride. Let's watch some Pride." And I'm like, "Okay, I've never really watched it. Let's do that." And it was, man, I hope I say that. It was one where I think it was Dan Severn and some giant Japanese dude, and they just go to the middle of the ring, hold the back of each other's heads, and so you know exactly what fight I'm talking about.
Yes.
And I'm going to be honest, like I looked at it and I'm like, this is what everybody thinks is so amazing, and I was like, this is kind of dumb. And he's like, all right, whatever. So like we went off, did our thing, and I never watched UFC, MMA again until that season of Ultimate Fighter. And I started saying, oh, wait a minute, these guys are actually really good. Like, what have I been missing? And then I started watching like old UFCs and stuff. Like, so I didn't even see UFC one until I had already been training Brazilian Jiu Jitsu for several years.
Kind of the same, man. Like I tell people this. I had a misconception. So I was probably like I was born in '87, so I'm to turn 37 this month. So I was probably like 10, 11 years old watching like pro wrestling, right? Like WCW, the NWO era. Like that was it. And then when they moved that over to I think it was the WWF, I stopped watching pro wrestling as a kid. I was like getting into junior high, teenage years, like playing football. I just stopped watching pro wrestling. And I would hear about cage fighting, right? And I was like, oh, that's pro wrestling when they put the thing over the thing. But in fact, I was hearing about UFC 1 and 2 and 3. Like that was kind of in the culture, but like I wasn't charting it until like really after I got out of high school, 2006. Like immediately started training in martial arts, and that was also probably UFC was probably around UFC. It was right around the time also that like just after I started training, or had started training a little after this was Matt Hughes versus Hoist Gracie.
Okay.
Right, like the UFC 50s and 60s, like those were the hot ones that everybody was watching or had the tapes, or we would watch those when we were gonna watch a pay-per-view at the gym. But it's wild. That was before the Fox deal. It just has exploded in our culture since that time. But like I likened it more to pro wrestling when I was hearing about cage fighting than
Yeah.
I just as a kid not knowing what was going on, or I would have been a lot more interested probably.
Yeah, I think I had some of that going on too, because I was never interested in pro wrestling. And then when I saw that fight, I'm like, well, this basically looks like pro wrestling, on steroids. So it just wasn't interesting. And it was, but the Stephan Bonner, I really liked Stephan Bonner. I liked his attitude through the whole thing. And I liked Forrest Griffin. And man, that fight that they had was unbelievable. It's still got to be one of the top fights they've ever had.
Oh yeah, and what a tragedy Stephen Bonner passed.
Yeah.
This
Yeah,
rough.
that sucks.
But and then too, like another notable thing about Stephen Bonner is that if I'm not mistaken, he was a Carlson Gracie senior black belt, right? Like him and Miguel
Yeah,
Torres,
I think so.
they came out of Carlson's gym. He had some amazing MMA fighters at that time. Like so, I trained with Miguel Torres a couple of times when I was a blue belt, and man, I was teaching something today. I learned from that guy. Like it really, and it was like Carlson had just passed the first time I trained with Miguel, and when he got emotional when he started talking about it, like it had just happened like a little before that. I think he passed in '05 or '06, and I trained with Miguel probably in '07 or '08, but it was still like a fresh thing for him. And that was also when he was like he had lost the WC title right around that time. Yeah.
Yeah, that's yeah, man. So it's amazing how small our community is. You go back to you were talking about Scott Burr. Scott Burr's from my area.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah, he
I've
is.
trained with Scott Burr a ton of times, and he's tough dude,
I
tough,
love
tough, tough
that
dude.
guy. And such a thoughtful teacher. Like I like when some in communications they'll call it working the pause, but I had a professor like this as a mentor to me, and he would be talking to you, and instead of saying or just kind of he would pause until he found the right words, and then he would give you the right words, and it was almost like you were on a cliffhanger because he had drawn you in with the previous words. But Scott, like I was thinking training with him, I was like, man, I'm drawn in, and then like he's not talking, and then he comes with the perfect metaphor to keep that engagement and that understanding and learning happening, and that's a sign of a great teacher. So
Yeah.
I did a private with him in Cali when we're out there, and then he stopped by here on his way back, and we did a private with him. So it was great.
Yeah, last time I trained with him, he left this area right not long after he earned his black belt. Under because he's under Steve, it's technically under Steve Maxwell, but
Mhm.
yeah, I know he trains. They all train pretty much with Hickson as often as they can. Um, but
Have
yeah,
you trained with
yeah,
Hickson before? I mean, I'm with the Pedro link. Have you got a
I
chance?
have only been with Hickson in a seminar. You know, I that's about it. It was about what 10 years ago, I guess he was doing a tour and doing a few seminars, and it's all about the same thing. It was all about connection and trying to just get everybody to understand connection. And I didn't truly. I was a brand new black belt. I didn't truly understand what he was getting at the time. Um, I do it all the time now, which is funny because now it's starting to click, and I'm like, oh, I get what he was saying because he would just like it felt like he was just teaching half moves. You know, he'd be like, okay, you put your arm here, you put the press, move out, see where it goes. Like, and it's like, wait, what do you mean see where it goes? Where do we go to guard from there? Do we, you're looking for like this full move, and it's like that's not realistic. Maybe you have a full move, but the guy's going to do something, right? Like at this point, you're moving, that guy's going to move. It's too late. You've got this frozen moment of chaos. You can do something in that moment, and then after that, you've got a new moment of chaos. You got to figure that out. And I always tell my guys, war is chaos, combat is chaos. All we're doing is freezing those moments of time, and that's where your what ifs come from. Because the moment I change that position, something else can happen. You can predict it, and hopefully you've done your job in learning to predict it. But maybe you can't predict it. Maybe they just run away, which you see all the time in some matches or whatever. It's like, well, that guy just doesn't even want to grapple. I don't know what we're doing here.
No, that's. I've listened in interviews Hickson talk about adaptability, and he even has a little segment about that in his SDU program. But that's kind of what you're describing. It's like he's like, yeah, well, I do this, and then once like break the body lock, then he might do something else, and it's like, so I might just do the hip throw, but if he does something else, the hip throw's not going to be what's right. So it's like he's constantly assessing whether it's which Howder. Interesting. Every time I train with him, he talks about this mode of thinking, breaking out of the binary, right? Where it's like, okay, well, there's this and that, and then there's this third thing, and then do you just start extrapolating out all these future things? But like, basically, he's saying don't overcommit, right? And you've got to do just enough. That's like Chris Burns. I don't know if you're familiar with him, but like he named his gym 0 Point. Like Hickson talks about going from 0 to 1 to 2. You never go back to 0. You move forward from 0. You never go 0 to 10 immediately because you probably just will trap them around 3 or 4 on the power scale. But yeah, every time I've trained with him, I've done 2 privates with him and 2 seminars. And it was a long gap. It's like I was still a brown belt when I did the seminars. And I'm getting my second degree next Wednesday. So
Congratulations.
thank you. But I mean, you leave the room feeling like a child, and like you just learned the armbar for the first time or whatever, whatever he showed that you've known the whole time but didn't do it that way. And then too, I'm with these other black belts like Scott Burr or Chris Burns or Howder, and they're saying the same thing, and I'm just like, y'all are blowing my mind. That this blows your mind is even
Yeah.
more of a mind fuck. Like it's
Well, I think it just shows, you got guys like him, like Audra Gracie, like Gordon Ryan, like these guys who are just orders of magnitude better than most people in their era, right? And it's like watching Hojer dismantle Buchecha, who is in his own right one of the best ever. Everybody was like, "Wait, what? What did like he didn't?" Okay, that just happened, like. And like, it wasn't even like Buchecha came back and was like, "Oh yeah, I could get him next time." Like, it's like he knew. He was like, "Oh, I found out."
Yeah,
you know, and
I trained with Hodger for the first time recently, right around the same time I trained Pedro. He was taught a seminar at Masters Worlds, and it was great. I enjoyed it. I mean, it was definitely one of those top seminars, but he is notably one of the greats for sure. Like he's blown my mind just watching just simple techniques. Like it's not. That's what I love about it. It's not. He's not usually playing like an inverted lasso spider, you know. Which
yeah, he does it
not
so
to talk
well.
about that. I mean, it's like if that's your game, cool, right? Like I've actually like my coach was Nova Uniao coming up and was like they were super and always have been super into Spider Guard. So like I was always exposed to it. I don't really play it a ton as a 37-year-old black belt.
Yeah,
You know, I can, I teach it occasionally, but it's just not my personal preference.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm just always impressed. You know, I went to Gordon Ryan's seminar. I traveled out to Wisconsin again, of all places. That's where he ended up doing a seminar a year ago, and I was just so impressed with him. Like, you know, because the character he plays is very different than the person he is. It seems, and he uh he sat there. He taught 3 hours on back control, basically attacking you, basically how to rear naked choke someone, right? And how to get their hands out of the way to do it. And it's not very different from what's on his videos or anything like that. But it's different when there's when he's there and can say, "Oh no, you're grabbing slightly wrong," or you know. And then he sat down and he said, "Look, guys, I know you have paid a lot of money to be here with me today." He's like, "I will not leave this mat until I've answered any and every single question you have." And he sat there for another 2 hours just answering questions. You know, and I thought that was really impressive of him. Like, you know, he did his job. He came in, he did his 3 hours. He could have left, took a hike, and took however much he made and left. And he didn't want to do it that way. He and I mean, I was just really impressed with him. And then of course his skill level is just unbelievable. You know, like just watching him drill things, how smooth he is and everything, how calculated every movement is. You know, it's watching high level athletes do high level stuff. It's impressive. Uh, yeah, I haven't got to train with Hodger yet. I'd love to train with him, or Hodger rather. I'd love to train with him, but he's in Europe, so that makes it tough most of the time.
Man, I'd love to train with his dad.
Yeah,
Also, to be honest, Mauricio, that would be because I've seen several of his videos and I really enjoy the just his information, and like what just to even train with somebody that was on the mats, trained a ton with holes. That's cool.
yeah. It would be interesting to me to have a conversation with some of these guys about how they like to deal, specifically in promotions, like right, because like I look at promotions and you got a guy who maybe started when he was 45. You know, what's your expectation of that guy versus the guy who starts when he's 20 and picks it up like this? You know, that guy who's 26 years old and beating everybody. Like probably like I imagine Hodger was that way. I imagine a lot of those guys were that way. You know, they were just always pretty good at it. It made sense to them, and like how they like to deal with them and keep them challenged and keep building on them even past them, because I'm 44 years old. I can't keep up with some of these guys anymore, at least not physically. And it's an interesting journey for me to see that, to watch guys that are young and enthusiastic about it, and that you want to keep them interested, you want to keep them moving, and you want to make sure you're promoting them the right. But like, I don't know, I feel like the average purple belt these days is just as good as the average black belt back when I was promoted. You know what I mean? Like it's
The level is
it's
gone
just a
up.
different thing.
Well, and I will say, like with Hicks and stuff, like you feeling it is a major benefit. But like even with him, he has an academy now, right? Like he has the online academy rather. Like he's got his little studio space, which he works with small groups. But he has that online site, and I will hop on there and like, man, after I was out there training with him, two of the things we did in the private, he had a video over, and I was like, oh, supplemental resource review, yes, because it's like we weren't filming or anything, And it wasn't some of the groups he works with, he films the techniques with them, right? And it's like guys like Scott Burr or Chris Burns that I know that are the ukes in the video, or Nori. And but man, we are in a day and age, like I've really been getting some context on this. Like I remember vividly right around the time I started training, my college roommate standing in line to get the first iPhone, right? And then I remember having an iPhone for a few years, and there was this weird phase where like I wanted really to watch YouTube on my TV, but there were no smart TVs.
Right.
There was Netflix, but I was still in the disc phase in the mail of Netflix,
Yeah.
right? Like streaming just wasn't prominent, and I would like hook an adapter into my phone that would let it work on some of my TVs, that I could like play the YouTube app and like watch like Ari Nazan, like submissions 101 and stuff, you know.
Yep.
But now like everything's in the palm of your hand. Then there was the bottleneck of the phone hard drive size, right? Or the iPad, and it was like too small. But now it's like I have 512 gigs. It's like impossible to fill up. I mean, you can do it, but just that sort of stuff. Like, man, I have like 50 apps on my phone. I remember I'd have 10, and you'd have to delete. You'd have to always be deleting stuff. But that has rapidly to go from the VCR, which I saw you comment on my post,
Yeah.
to what we're doing right now in such a short amount of time is, I mean, just in my adult life, that's remarkable.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. And I mean, the pandemic, for all the negative that happened during it, you know, one of the positives I think was like even more content came out during that time, because some of these guys, you know, they make their living doing seminars, they couldn't do that. And I think Bernardo, thank God for that guy, you know, was like, hey, I've got a resource, come film. Let's just make it happen. And you know, now all of a sudden, and it was expensive, but you know, you got John Donaher right at your fingertips. You've got Gordon Ryan. You know, I mean, basically anybody you want. Dante Leone. I mean, just all these amazing practitioners, just showing you everything they do. You know, and it's like it's awesome. It's also intimidating sometimes, because you know you'll have a guy come. You know, you'll be teaching your basic armbar, and a guy will be like, well, you know, Gordon says do it this way, and it's like, okay, awesome. Gordon can definitely armbar me. Let's start there. What I'm saying is, you don't even know where your feet are. Let's take it one step at a time, guy. You know, what did one of my coaches for my competition team? Somebody said something, and he goes, that's real ambitious. He goes, but Mount Everest is littered with the bodies of ambitious people. Let's slow down a little bit and learn our fundamentals.
That's hilarious. That's a great.
Yeah, like so. Uh, you know, you gotta kind of soak all that information into there. But I mean, yeah, these guys have just more access, and me too. You know, I actually I have a BJJ Fanatics account. I use it to help train my team. It's like, hey guys, you know, you know, a lot of times it's like Gordon stuff, or I really like Gordon's stuff, and I like the way he presents it. You know, it's like, here's some great stuff from you know, butterfly half guard. Why don't we practice this, go over it, make sure we're doing it right, and then let's start teaching that, you know, for a month from now or whatever. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing how fast you can learn new information. And you know, a guy like Gordon, I don't know, he can show you what he's going to do and do it to you anyway. It's just like Hickson, right? Like, you know, a guy like that. What's that story? Do you remember the story where he took all the world champions from the IBJJF one year and gave them all a private lesson on the UPA?
Oh,
And they so I don't know if everybody's heard this, but can't remember what year it was. This is probably, I heard this when I was a blue belt, so God knows how long ago it was. But they were all like, "Come on, Hickson, we don't want to learn the UPA. We can do it." He goes, "Okay, mount me," and he just UPA'd every single one of them. He's like, "All right, we're gonna work UPA," and like, for anybody who doesn't know UPA, that's trap and roll. Some people call it trap and roll, but it's like, you know, you got a guy like that. You know, he can tell you what he's going to do, and he's going to do it to you. You know, not many guys can do that. And Hickson, you know, in my time, Hickson, Hojer, and Gordon are the only ones I've seen able to get to that level.
I saw. So the one of the Hickson seminars I went to was his red belt promotion. And
Okay.
but before the promotion happens, um Rodrigo Comprito is like, I believe he's the head ref of the. He's not. Marcelo Siriema is like the dude at the top, but like of the like floor referees, he's like the main guy. Like he's who did my certification when I had to go through the rules training. He has like blue hair or green hair, like he has crazy color hair. But
Yeah, I know who he is. I've seen him. I don't know him
yeah,
personally.
so he was there, and like it's weird, small community world, like you were saying, that like he was at this Hickson seminar, and Hickson was making a point to use him throughout. Like Leo Xavier was there assisting, but he was like, "Oh, Rodrigo, get down, hold me in mounts." But it was the hit. It was the what he calls the elbow escape, like hip escape out.
Yeah.
And but dude, he's like, no, 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 okay, this time stop me from escaping. And he did it to him like 4 times. Just like,
Yeah.
and every time it wasn't like he just kind of hipped out and barely. He made that dude sit down on his butt all 4 times. Like, was like, it's like the dude just fell in a hole. And I was just like, and he's like, okay, I'm going to do this again. Stop me from doing it. Like, what a flex. And that was
Yeah,
27. It's 27.
and then like Pedro has a little bit of that. You know what I mean? Like you see, obviously Pedro's way smaller than Hickson, but like he has a little bit of that. You know, you'll be like, "Hey, I have this problem," and he's like, "Okay, let me feel." You know, and like just the way he moves, like you feel yourself get stiff, even though you don't want to get stiff, right? And then all of a sudden you're falling, and you're like, "What just happened? Like why? I swear I was doing the same move, but why is it working for you and not for me?" And then like it'll be some detail here, about how he's like the way he's holding your thumb in position or something. But like they have a way to make your whole body go rigid, and then you know how it is. You're a black belt. Once their body's rigid, it's done. Game's over. They're not moving now, and I'm jealous of it, man. I'm jealous of it.
He choked me from in that seminar. Like, came over and worked with our group a few times throughout the seminar, and he was showing some like stuff from like kind of bumping you and making you post your hand from like a knee shield.
Okay.
Context was like, the guy's too big for me to close my legs around. That was the question somebody asked, and he's like, oh, and he showed a few different techniques, but one of them was like, on one of them, you kind of like stood up and swept him over and got him in reverse knee on belly. I'd never seen it, and it's sick. And I've done it a few times since rolling. But, and he's like, oh, he had a whole series off of it. They do this, they grab. But one of them was just like a cross choke. But the way he leveraged, I was
Yeah.
just like, I've
He
never,
uses his hips.
like, he choked a shit. Like, I mean, I've never been choked like that. It was insane. And he's like, you got to be careful. It's so strong. It'll make your grip explode. And I was like, okay, yeah, it was something else. And then I was going with our dude had like just won pans at heavyweight. And that was my partner. He's like, yeah, let me do this. Oh man. But yeah, it's the leverage details were so amazing. That was a big, his leverage and angles were so simple but detailed.
Yeah.
How
Yeah.
did you how did you get hooked up with Pedro Sauer originally? Like, how did that whole connection
Yeah.
develop?
So like I mentioned I was training Aikido Jiu Jitsu back in the day, and I was teaching that at a place in Canfield, Ohio, and got deployed to Iraq with the army. And while I was there, the owner of the place writes me a letter. He said, "Hey, just so you know, when you come back, you can absolutely teach again, but for the moment, I got this guy named Tony Rinaldi. He's teaching this like wrestling style of jujitsu, like Brazilian jiu-jitsu." And I was like, "Oh, okay, cool, whatever, that's fine." So fast forward, I come back in April of 2004, and one of the first things I want to do is just get back on the mat. Right, my head is a mess, and I just need martial arts, and it's always been my church, so to speak. It's my zen. And I walk in, and this guy walks up to me. He's like, "Hey, I'm Tony." He goes, "You're Bill?" I'm like, "Yeah." He goes, "Hey, man, I hear you're here to teach tonight. You know, I can't wait to see." And he was like, just so nice and so genuine. And he's this bright redheaded Italian guy from the Youngstown area. And I go, you know what? I've trained with a lot of wrestlers while I was in Iraq, and you know we did what we could. I go, I'd really be interested if you do Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. I've never been introduced to it. I'd love to see some of it. You know, can we just do your class and you teach what you want? And he's like, yeah, sure, man, let's do that. And so he teaches. It's a basic class on how to pass the half guard. You know, just like a foot pry to get out, and then a Americana afterwards. That's all he went over in the class. And I'll never forget this because I tell this to all my beginners. You know, so there I am. This is 2004. So at that point, I had been training martial arts for 20 years, and I
Wow.
had 3 black belts at the time. You know, like, and it seemed so fucking complicated. Pardon my language. It seemed so complicated and like so many details and so many steps. And I was like, how is anybody ever going to remember this to actually use it? Like that. That's all that just kept going through my mind. Is just like there's too many steps. And so I tell that to all my white belts now. I'm like, look, I understand how you feel. This is how I felt, and I already had 20 years of training. I can't imagine how you feel coming into this brand new. Like, so he teaches the class, and I'm like, okay, you know, I think I got that. And he's like, hey, man, do you want to roll? And I was like, yeah, sure. He goes, well, why don't you roll with me first? And I'm like, okay, cool. And you know, like I don't know anything really about the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu culture, but what he's really doing is making sure I'm not an asshole, right? He makes sure I'm not going to hurt people or try to hurt people. So we roll, and I think he arm bars me once, and then like I pass his half guard, and I get this Americana, and you know, again, not understanding. I'm coming from a very traditional martial arts background where the instructor never loses, right? I don't know, like you just don't lose to your students. It's not something you do. So I'm thinking, oh, I got this guy. You know what I mean? Like that's awesome. I can do this. I'm already good at this. And he's like, hey man, you can roll with anybody you want. You seem fine. Have a great night. You know, train with anybody. And I'm like, okay, cool. So next is this guy, and he's like 160 pounds, and I'm not small. Right now, I'm 240. At the time, I think I was 220. And he comes up and he's like, "Hey, you want to train, man?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay." And he goes, "Okay, my name is John. His name is John Fleet." And he comes up and he just taps me on the shoulder and he goes, "Hey, just do this when you're done." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." And I'm thinking, "What a jerk!" You know, like I know what a tap is, right? And he's like, "Do you want to start standing? Do you want to start on the ground?" I'm like, "Standing for sure," because I did Aikido Jiu Jitsu and I know judo a little bit. You know, in my mind, I'm just thinking that's where I'm going to win. And he shoots a single leg from what felt like it was from like 7 miles away and moved like a lightning bolt and did this low line single that just put me on my ass. And then he's right around my guard. There wasn't even a guard yet, you know. So like, boom, he's right around me and immediately mounts me and arm bars me. Like it felt like it lasted maybe 30 seconds. And I was like, what the hell just happened? Right. That's when it clicked. Like, oh, I couldn't have kicked that guy if I wanted to. I couldn't have done a damn thing to him. He just owned me. And, you know, I asked him, I'm like, hey, man, you beat me so fast. Why don't you teach this? You know, the instructor, I beat him. And he goes, man, you didn't beat Tony. Tony kicks my ass. You know, and I'm like, wait, what? He goes, man, he's letting you work. He's just making sure you're a nice guy and everything. And I'm like, oh, shit. And, you know, now I feel like such a dick. And it dawned on me. I'm like, I'm never putting a black belt on again. Like, I'm just never doing it again until I earn it here. Like, all these guys in here, the white belts, the brown belt, they can all kick my ass. And so the next day I come in and I'm like, hey, Tony, do you have a white belt or anything I can wear? I don't have one at home. And he's like, you don't have to do that. And I'm like, no, I really do. Like, this is it for me. And that's when I started Brazilian Jiu Jitsu. And about 3 weeks later, um, he brought in Pedro Sauer. So at that point, Tony hadn't even been affiliated with anybody. He'd been training for 9 years, gone to some Hoist Gracie seminars, you know, and some Salo Ribeiro stuff because Salo lived in Toledo, Ohio. I don't know what it is about Toledo, Ohio, but like Salo and Janji were there for like 4 years when I first started. And then they moved out to San Diego. And now, you know, Dante Leone is in Toledo, Ohio. So something about Toledo just attracts world class grapplers, I guess. But anyway, long story short, you know, we get hooked up with Pedro. Tony gets his blue belt under Pedro at that point, and then you know the rest is history. I earned my black belt in 2013, and that I had opened a school in 2010. So I had moved away or moved far enough away that I didn't mind opening a school and everything. So, but yeah, I mean, and you know how it is at that point. You don't even know how good they really are, And I'll recount another story. It was Tony training with Pedro, and um, Tony's like, Bill, because like he heard from Pedro that Hickson could stop someone from passing his guard without even using his hands. And like you're a black belt now, like you could take a white belt and do that, and it's really sometimes like I realize I'm doing it. I'm like, oh, I'm being a jerk. I got to actually grapple here. Like you're being lazy, if anything, right?
Yeah.
And but like at the time, that sounds impossible. Like tell some guy who doesn't know jujitsu that you can stop him from even touching you without using your hands. They're going to think you're insane. And so Pedro, of course, does it and then sweeps him with a scissor sweep. And Tony's recounting the story to me. This is his story, and he's like, Bill, I was just sitting there, kind of with my head down, and Pedro's like, "What's wrong, man?" And he's like, I never thought I was like world champion level. He goes, but like if this is like where the best guys are and this is where you start, he goes, I thought maybe I was like here. He's like, I just realized I don't know shit. And Peter's like, isn't that great? He goes, it will never stop. You're never going to stop being amazed by techniques. You're never going to stop being amazed by moves. He's like, you will learn now for the rest of your life. And yeah, that's a story that always stuck with me. I wish I could have been in that private lesson with them for that, but that was the first time Pedro ever did that to Tony, and then from that point on, man, we've been under him ever since.
The journey begins.
Yeah.
No, that's a great story, man. Because everybody goes through that, and like it's almost like when you just talking about putting on the white belt, like you realize during usually that first 6 months, usually quickly you realize that, oh man, my whole it's a like almost like a portion of in part an ego death, because you realize that you're like, for me, I was like, oh man, I just thought if like I got into a fight I would have done okay, and I'm talking, I had no training. I played football, right? Like,
Yeah.
so, but then you start realizing, well, man, the mass of the population walks around thinking that way. And then you just go through, it's a big change to start to view the world through this martial arts lens, because it's a very real way to look at things.
Yeah. Yeah. You get to see things, where you are, right? Like in the pecking order. And it's like, the funny thing is like, relatively adjusted people, well-adjusted people don't get into fights, right? Like you seem like, when's the last time you were in an actual fight, right? Probably not very often.
No, no. I
But
mean,
like,
really,
you probably don't even want to get it.
yeah, I told this story on a previous podcast. Like one of the only potential fights I would have got into as an adult, I just talked the dude out of fighting me. I just got out of the gym too. I was wearing full contact fighter fight shorts, which I had actually had my very first fight in, by the way. And like had just got back to my apartment from the gym. Is like my girlfriend at the time's ex-boyfriend had like followed us. It is a weird deal. But I told it on the last podcast. But it I was just like, okay, yeah, here's what's gonna. It's just like verbal jujitsu. Like I just had such a confidence. Even I've been training maybe 3 years at that time, but that's what it had done for it. Transformed me as a person. Like because a lot of people's confidence is posturing. And you realize that, and it's I don't know. It's just a whole different way of looking at day-to-day stuff. Like I would go to such a great extent to avoid something like that also, because I know the potential and the ramifications of it. Yeah, something's gonna happen I didn't plan for, even though I do this every day, is one
Yeah.
part. So yeah, just avoid the fight if you can.
Well, and it's just funny, people's confidence. Cause like, my joke is always, you have the see red guys, right? The guys who see red and they beat
Bodies
people up.
yeah.
And I'm like, you don't hear that about anything else. No one's like, you know what? I see red, taxes are done. Right? Like I see red, history class gets taught. Like it just doesn't happen like that. And a guy was asking me, he's like, what do you think your chances are in a fight? And I go, you know, I usually play that stuff off pretty humble, right? I'm like, you know, whatever. I go, I don't like to get into fights, that kind of thing. And they go, realistically, some dude comes up and fights you. What do you think is going to happen? I go, look, it's just not going to be a good day for him, honestly. I'm like, it's just not. And they're like, well, what makes you that confident? I said, well, and I said, what do you do for a living? And I forget what he said, but it was something. I said, how good do you think you are at that? You know, like at your job. And he's like, pretty good. I go, like, so, you know, your boss needs something done, you can probably make it happen pretty quick, right? And he goes, yeah. I go, this is what I do every day for my life. I go, how many fights do you think the average person has been in? And they go, I don't know, two, three. I go, okay, cool. I go, well, I came up in an MMA gym, so I had to fight every day, like with guys who also knew how to fight, you know, and like we
Back
weren't
then,
smart
man.
about how to
Back then.
spar. You know, like you banging, you know how it is. Like you're coming out with bloody noses, black eyes. I mean, I had my orbital bones fractured, like all kinds of stuff, right? And I go, the simple fact is, this is what I do every day, and the average person isn't going to be able to do anything to me, and I know that because it happens every day. Every day, someone new comes in. I roll them. They feel like a child. They realize that you know that they don't know what they're doing. They join, and it's a good time. Like, but like that's all that's really going to happen. I go, I'll probably put them on the ground, hold them there, and they're going to realize real quick that it's been a bad day. They made a mistake.
And
So
it's interesting seeing, like I was kind of mentioned this a second ago, but like seeing people go through that, like because
yeah,
you'll roll with them and they will start realizing also while you're realizing they're a child, you see it in their eyes for the first time, perhaps, or they make remarks like your buddy to Pedro Sauer. They're sitting there with their head down, and it's almost funny to see now because I've seen it so many times. And as an instructor, I'm trying to help them work through it too. You know, like,
right.
hey, me too, buddy. You know, I get it.
Yeah,
I've tapped so many times. Like this dude over here that's winning pans and submitting everybody, and that trains as heavyweight, played college football. It's like I've tapped to that dude 50 times. I
yeah,
don't I just like I don't get upset about tap into people and I don't get excited by submitting them. Two things that permeated my colored belt years, you know.
yeah. The stuff you wish you could tell you wish you could make your colored belts understand better. It's like, hey man, none of this matters. You'll be okay. Like you got tapped today. It was a bad day. It happens.
Yep.
You know.
Just back to the drawing board. Better go assess whether or not you need to work on your arm triangle defense now, or if it was just there they were on today. Because that's with me over the years. It's like I'm gonna get caught, you know, a couple arm triangles or something, and I hadn't been caught 6 months previously. It's like, oh, what's going on? Do I have a bad habit? You know? And but a lot of people don't look at it that way. It's like, oh, I suck. I suck at not getting submitted. It makes me feel bad as a person. It's like their masculinity, particularly you know, dudes starting out.
Yeah.
Um, but whatever, man. I started when I was 19. I went through all that same stuff. Plus, like you said, at that time, a story I've been telling, like it just you think back on this stuff, and I'm like, what the fuck were we doing? Like, but we had like one matted wall. It was like two wall mats and in this corner and then two wall mats, right? Like, so it's, I guess two matted walls, but the sheetrock was all torn behind it.
Oh yeah.
But we would like pull up two zebra mats off the floor and like make like a little pit, like to close it in. And there would be like a little gap and like guys holding up the mats, like yelling, yeah, I get it, side you go. And that's why the sheetrock was broken too. I would like
Yeah.
to, but man, it was so rudimentary at that time. It was the training methodologies. Like, man, it's come such a long way, and to witness.
Oh yeah. You know, being my degree is or one of my degrees is in exercise physiology. So like, and certified strength and conditioning specialist. So like, I'd look sometimes and I'd be like, you ever consider just taking a day off? like just go for a nice walk one day, and you know how it is. It's like, nope, gotta bang. Like, okay, I really feel like that might not be the way to go today, but okay. You
No,
know,
I got a fighter has a fight coming up. It's his fourth kickboxing fight. He's undefeated. And it's like it's in like 10 days. It's not this Friday, it's next Friday or next Saturday. Wait, is it next Friday? So, but man, he is just like all the way leading up to this last 4 or 5 weeks. He's been doing like 15 to 20 miles a week of running, sprints, and hill work, and working with me a couple of times, and then sparring. And TJ Brown's this UFC vet that lives here in Arkansas. He went and did 2 privates with him. It's cross trained, and he's done all this stuff, and he's in fight mode and cutting weight, and had a crazy training session yesterday. And he's like, "Yeah, tonight I think I'm gonna blah 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 blah." And I was like, "Man, I think you should like, walk 30 minutes and then like break a little sweat doing a little workout here, and then maybe run a mile and just chill." As we have testing this week. We're not having classes tonight. So he's going to but he's talking about this crazy cardio and bag work. And I was like, we need to dial. We
really
still got
listen
some
to
hard
you.
training to do. Oh yeah, he does. And
Yeah.
but man, I truly try. And like, that was because we were having a big conversation about how he felt and about he went up and trained with my coach yesterday at his gym. And I was here doing testing. So, but just talking with him and like, how do you feel? This how much time you got left? Because the fighter will obsess over every little detail and overtrain themselves. And that was what we're talking about. It's just balancing. It's why you have a coach. Is
Yeah.
I've done this with a lot of people in his position, and fortunately, he's not cutting an absorbent amount of weight or anything. Everything's on track in my mind, and he's we're 10 days out, and I got to do all the stuff I could do, and da, 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 da. And I'm like, yeah, you're doing a great job, bud. Here's what we're gonna do for the next 3 training sessions we do, and that takes the load off of them too. I'm like, don't worry about that. You do this, and man, I remember what it was like too. I fought it far enough back when my first 2 fights were unsanctioned, right? Like no athletic commission. So
Yeah.
it was and that's in Arkansas. We got it became sanctioned in 09 or 10. We didn't even have
It
rest.
was about the same time in Ohio because I started in '04, maybe it was '07, '08. It got sanctioned. Um, I never got in the cage. That's one of my few regrets I have is that I never took any fights. I was still going through college and stuff at the time, and that I just you know it's not something I did, but
That's
I
why
fought everything.
I
But
scaled it back, honestly. Is when I graduated, I just like didn't really have down what I wanted to do, or wasn't really confident to commit to doing something like history. Uh,
yeah,
but that has paid off for me in every way, really. I mean, I'm the only person that I knew from like people I went to school with that had a master's that actually got a full-time job teaching college, which is massively beneficial at the time that I did it. I mean, it was a good benefits and a side income, and I was there enough that I could still at the time run my gym. But like we're at like 450 members now, 8,000 square feet, and it has become increasingly difficult to do both. So
yeah, for sure.
yeah,
Now, do you run the business side of everything too, or like what's your role in your academy?
my wife and I, and then we have some great assistants and employees that help, or like assistant program directors, but it's kind of a division of labor. um Cora pays the taxes, so we don't go to tax jail, because I would have made sure we went to tax jail. But she's so good with that side of things, so she is uh more so on the business side. But and we collaborate there, and shared division on of labor on like marketing, and our we have 2 girls, Heather and Hannah, and they're great. Like one works with contacts all of our leads, and that fighter I was telling you about, Howie, he works here. And between the 5 of us, it's just like that's all the people involved with the business and the marketing and the advertising. And I'm more like big picture stuff. Like we redid our frontage, expanded and added a parking lot in the back, put up a fence, are putting new signage out now. I'm getting a sign out by the road. We moved in here as a full-time fitness center 3 weeks before COVID, and we got a really good deal. It was been on the market for a little while, and we just moved in, cleaned it up, and then we just been kind of adding to it. And that's kind of what I like. I oversee all of those projects and coordinate with. I have a bunch of instructors I work with, and she does too. You know, it's just we're we have so many people. We have like a fitness side where we do spin with big fitness kickboxing crowd, and then hot yoga, and then like some Tabata and HIIT classes. And
Yeah.
that's like a whole other market that just over time grew for us. We had to spend this like within like 6 months. So that's, I'm building the room for that and going to pick up the bikes in Oklahoma from a place that was, just it's, it takes a lot. And I mean, we definitely have to divide it up because Cora is more with the fitness side, and then we are kids martial arts together, and I'm more the adult martial arts. And we balance it all out, man. It's weird. I didn't really think I'd be doing this. Like for more than half
It's
my life, I had there was no thoughts about any of this stuff.
yeah, it's funny because it's something I wanted to do since I was a kid, man. And like the minute I started martial arts, I just fell in love with it.
Me too.
And I didn't know what it could be as far as that goes, and so I got real jobs, back in the day, and had a good job with Philips Healthcare. I was working in their research and development programs on CAT scans, MRIs, PET scanners. And when my mother died, and I still had my school, but it was like kind of just a part-time side gig. It was fine, but I think it had like 30 members or something. And when my mom died, I decided life was just way too short. So I was like, I'm going to do this full time. And
When was that? What year was that?
that was 2014. So maybe I had like 80 people at that point, but I felt comfortable enough that I had what it took to just build it up. And at our highest, we're at about 300 members. I think right now we're sitting at like 280. Um, so yeah, it's just been something that I love, and the difference you get to make in people's lives is so dramatic. From just like, I had one of my favorite stories as a police officer. He was chasing someone and had already drawn his weapon. So now, like, when that happens, we're moments away from maybe shooting and taking another life, right? Like that's a very big deal. And managed to get a hold of the guy, um, and in their tussle, one of the things he said to me was, I had the wherewithal and the comfort in my level of grappling now to put my weapon away, because he knew that now that he was grappling him, he could take care of it. And it's like, man, you know, that saved so many lives right there, right? Like he didn't have to shoot somebody, you know, he did not, and everything that comes with taking a life, right? Let alone like as a law enforcement officer, and all the scrutiny that comes with that, justified shootings and whatnot. And that's one of my favorite things. And then another one I just got from a guy that I trained 10 years ago. He hasn't trained in like 10 years. And he writes me out of the blue. He's like, "Hey, Bill, I just wanted you to know that I just used my jujitsu that you taught me." He's like, "Some guy came at me with a screwdriver." I'm like, "What?" And if you've ever been to Ravenna, like that makes sense. But like, he says some guy came at me with a screwdriver. He goes, "All I could think to do was like clinch, throw him to the ground, and then I just pinned his arm, and he basically Americana'd him. But like he couldn't even remember the name of the move. He's like, I remember I like bent his arm up and like pulled it back and got the screwdriver away, and then and I was like, man, that's amazing. Like
Man,
then the people you touch, just like their mental state changes, right? They're able to be more confident in their jobs, and just so many other things that it touches. And it's like,
oh, that's somebody messaged me about that today, and it's been like we were talking about his job today, but it's and I think it's the confidence, but And like I went to fitness center today and yesterday and the day before. And that like blows a lot of people's mind that I would like work out outside of my gym doing whatever.
Yeah.
But I think for a lot of people, like think about the percentage of the membership that probably does not do any fitness, right? Yeah, you're gonna have some runners, you're gonna have some fitness center people, but the vast majority, that is their fitness.
Yeah.
And they start getting more than the recommended 30 minutes of exercise per day. And they I think that produces cognitive benefits in people.
Oh,
And,
absolutely.
and then bam, okay, wow, I can take care of myself. I feel I submitted that guy in class, and that was he's trained. Like I feel I've never felt anything. And it just is. But and then you got to be getting more as long as you're not getting hit in the head in 2006 with MMA gloves as hard as possible. But you're getting new neural pathways forming, and I've always just since I've really gone through college and started looking at the benefits of exercise and listening to the suggestions and walking and doing things and mitigated a lot of aches and pains in my back because of things I do to offset that. But I've just really thought a lot about that. I'm like, man, these people that have never exercised their whole adult life, maybe, or their whole life, and they start doing martial arts, and then it's like they lose weight, and all of these positives happen, and and then they're gaining confidence. It's like almost like a double-edged sword with the confidence and the increased focus, and then their body is healthier, even though it's undergoing abuse. You feel like you're getting stronger.
Yeah.
So and it's special.
Yeah. And on top of that, like the American College of Sports Medicine has a position statement that says, I'm going to paraphrase, but something to the effect of physical fitness is related to a decreased rate in all cause mortality. Literally any reason you could die, being physically fit will decrease your likelihood of dying from it.
Yeah,
And that's everything from like, diabetes and cancer to, getting shot and falling off a building. Like if you're physically fit, you're more likely to survive any of those things.
no,
And
there's
that too builds into kind of what you were saying, that confidence.
there's a statement I use about like the cognitive benefits of, and I got this from my college biology professor. But 30 minutes of exercise a day, and I forget this was from like some source that he had that was reputable. He's talked about it all the time. That's why I have it ingrained. But 30 minutes of exercise per day boost your cognitive ability by up to 30% for as long as 6 hours. Right. So, like, you're actually, you think you're going to be more tired after you exercise, but you're actually going to have more energy for 6 hours, 30% more energy than you would have had you not have exercised. But the lie we tell ourselves is that I'm going to go exercise and I'm going to be tired and then I'm not going to want to do my day at work or whatever. And you leave the fitness center not feeling that way, though. You feel great. I felt great. Yeah. I got worked out for 2 hours yesterday and I was like, I feel great. And I had a productive day after. So physical fitness, it's an imperative thing for me, but I definitely had to grow up as a person to come to those terms.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I actually talked about it in my last episode. So I had one of my students because we're bigger. Again, I'm 240, right? And I'm in decent shape for 240, but I'm still a big guy.
You
And
hey, are you doing you're somebody that I think so, are you doing AG1?
yeah, I use AG1 every day.
I saw you post about that, and then I started doing it because I was like, God, this guy seems what he knows. You were talking about the benefits either I just saw that you'd served the algorithm, got served up to me, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna try it. That was like the straw for me.
Yeah, I have ulcerative colitis, and like it's the first. Like, it's really hard for me to take in. Like I love vegetables, but a lot of times they come out looking the same as they went in, and so it's hard for me to digest some things. And AG1 seems to be real bioavailable to me. It seems to really help. Um, Yeah, and I'm sure there's plenty of other greens out there, green drinks that you can use that are just fine, like, and it's funny because some people like were hitting me up like, why are you trying to sell this? I'm like, I literally don't sell it. I'm just telling my friends something I'm doing that helps me. Like, and they're like, oh,
Well,
like I
that
have no.
that's how I took it, man. Honestly, like it's funny that people reach out to you and that I started doing it. You must have made a very convincing post.
I
But
must have. Yeah.
man, I mean, you're a little older than me, but then the closer I get to 40, my recovery, my car, just man, things I feel things are different. Like I started slowing down a little bit at 28, and then I didn't notice and it just now I notice small little things, and my nutrition's hard to balance in today's world. I mean, it's just we're
You have
super
to
busy
pass up a
at
lot of
home
stuff.
late. Yeah.
There's a lot of crap out there, and look, I mean, I'm guilty of eating it, more often than I should have. But like if you pass it up, you feel better. You actually feel a little more accomplished too. Like I was kind of hungry, and I saw that McDonald's, and I started salivating, but I was like, that's trash. Why don't I wait and get home? And, I don't know, have something slightly better than that at home, and you do, and it's kind of like going to the gym almost. They feel like I made a good decision, and I'm happy about that. Like be surprised how small things can add up like that. Small goals. But yeah, AG1. I drink that every morning, and have some fruit. That's like my breakfast, and then I just have Subway or something like that. Something relatively healthy for lunch. I say relatively because Subway is certainly not the healthiest, but it's better than McDonald's or some of the other alternatives. And then just have like a meal at home for dinner after I train. And it's usually not even that significant of a meal. It's usually just some eggs or something like that. And that's it. I'm a real picky eater too, so like I like everything plain. So it I don't know. I'm a weird eater, but
I am too. I
I,
don't do like a lot of condiments or anything like that. And
yeah,
I don't know. I think I might have some allergies even. Like anything that is red, like I get because kind of anything I eat that is red is not good for me. Like it
okay,
like upsets my stomach. Red pepper, chili powder, most red meats, and I've researched it, my blood type or different. I've got different theories about it, but it's just I'm kind of aware of what is not good, and I mean that's my wife and I. The things that bother me don't bother her at all.
huh,
Uh, so is another thing about it. So you kind of got to balance that. I thrive off of fruits and smoothies. Like right, I love
okay.
a smoothie, um, or acai bowls in a very jujitsu fashion. I had one last night. So
I just can't do it, man. It looks like tar to me. I'm just like, ugh.
apparently the version in Brazil before they like sweeten it up is like way darker and also like kind of bitter. They apparently talk smack about people who like the sweet version because
Okay,
it's like something's been added to it. It's like to make it taste better essentially because it's apparently like when you first like raw, it's apparently pretty bitter.
yeah. I just don't like those kinds of things. I'm like I said, I'm a weird eater, man. I'm picky.
Yeah. Oh, well, I bet a good friend of mine is also a black belt. He has ulcerative colitis, and his mom had it also.
Yeah.
So I've talked with him about that over the years, and then I have my wife's aunt has Crohn's, and I've known a couple of people that have struggled with that. But man, getting like the right absorption of nutrients, even without an issue like that, is it's just a balance. Like I'm trying to always supplement on the side, and then I'm like, well, I need to eat. I need to eat and take this together and do this in the morning and this in the evening, and it's just all a big balancing act, man. It's easy to lose track of. That's why I like that AG1 because it's a multi, and I do it first thing in the morning too, and it covers some of my bases.
Yeah. Yeah, that's why I do it. And some people say they don't like it, that it doesn't sit well with them, or they it gives them diarrhea or something. And, so be it. I was just telling people what helped me, and I know like you hear it advertised a lot, and sometimes when you hear Joe Rogan talk about it or whatever, it's like, well, he's getting paid to say that. So like That's kind of why I decided to put that out there, was like, hey, I tried it and it worked real well. So there you go. AG1, hit us up. We're not sponsored.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for real. That's but you know, too, Joe Rogan, man, what a source of like his podcast of information. Like he's been talking the last few episodes a lot about like his personal workouts. And I'm
Yeah.
like, I'll just like bust my phone out and take a note. And I've like picked several kettlebell workouts that like, this is the whole workout. And he just, like this morning, he's like, oh, my warm up is always 100 squats and 100 push ups. I made my fitness kickboxing class to do that at 5:30 a.m. They were just like, I was like, we're doing the Joe Rogan warm up. And they're like, oh, what is that? And I was like, just this. And they're like, that's terrible. But I was like, I'm doing it with you. Don't worry.
Yeah, I
So
feel like I've got to pay Joe and Jocko specifically. Like, I feel like I should have to pay them for marketing fees or something. You know, like so many people come in because they heard about jujitsu on Joe Rogan or Jocko. Uh, those guys. You talk about the delineations like the Karate Kid, Chuck Norris, and Texas Ranger. Those probably brought people in the doors. Joe Rogan has brought so many people in my door. I don't even know what to do.
oh,
But yeah, love him or hate him or whatever with his politics or whatever. I think his podcast is amazing, and I think he's a great guy who's done some great things.
I agree. A great ambassador. Like we need people like that.
Yeah,
Uh, so yeah, definitely he's been huge. And it's funny, I've seen recently some of his old interviews, like when he was on like news radio and stuff. He was on like like Dave Letterman or something, talking shit about Steven Seagal. And I
yeah,
was
I saw that one. Yeah, he still had hair back then, man. That was like right at the beginning of Fear Factor and stuff. And he was still talking shit about Steven Seagal.
you know, what's funny, somewhat recently, a good friend of mine, also a historian, this guy was harassing his wife. And this guy's in the military, and I worked with him for several years. He's like a friend of mine. And um he's like reached out and he's like, dude, I need to stop by the gym and talk to you. And he's like, this is the situation, and I think that this guy is gonna like show up at my wife's work, and she's worried about it. And like and he's like 50 years old, right? Like, and has two kids. And I mean, but he's like the ROTC guy. Like he's not in bad shape. He knows the UPA. Like
Okay.
I've worked with him. He's done some jiu-jitsu. He's driven an hour and done jiu-jitsu with me through the summer, when he's not teaching. So like I've trained with him a little bit, but he's like, well, what should I do if I get in a fight for real? And I was like, we talked about three or four small things, like standing guillotine, like clinch,
Yeah.
like a knee. But I was like, you remember when Joe Rogan snatched that dude up on Fear Factor in a tie clinch? And he was
Yeah.
like, yeah, I do. And I was like, yeah, dude. It's like you snatch somebody up by the head and just pull them, just control them, just pull them in. And this dude ended up showing up at his wife's work. He ended up snatching the dude up in a clinch and kneed him once. And he said the guy turned into the biggest crying puddle of just like, oh, please, no, like this, don't hurt me anymore. Like I'm leaving. Just like collapsed totally. But I was like, I'm
I bet
proud.
that dude never had better sex in his life.
Dude,
His wife was like, let's go.
I texted him weeks later and I was like, you were a beacon of masculinity. Oh man. But and just like that's just lightly trained, and he did some training in the military. And again, he had come down here and trained with me, but like that was a big thing for him. I was proud of him. It was a cool
Yeah,
story. It just happened
awesome.
like 6 weeks ago or something. So
Like, and that's like you really, I mean, like teaching history and stuff, that's probably great, but you don't get that kind of feeling. You know what I mean? Like you changed a guy's life forever with a small conversation. You know what I mean? About an anecdote, really, of like Joe Rogan snatching some dude in a tie clinch. Like
yeah. Yeah, and I told him an anecdote from Robert Drysdale, actually. First time I ever met Drysdale, he was telling me about how he got stuck cornering a dude in an MMA fight that was a striker. He had no jujitsu, like none. He'd never done jujitsu one time, but he was like a K1 guy or something. Like he was a successful striker, but And he's like, Robert Drysdale's agreed to corner him, and he realizes he doesn't have any jiu-jitsu, and he's like, oh my god. He's like, none. And then he starts thinking, he's like, well, we're like they're warming up, like it's like they're
Yeah.
at the venue. And then he's like, I'm gonna show you standing guillotine and guillotine from guard. And that dude goes out there and submits the guy with the guillotine. Like I
That's
think he
awesome.
got taken down and got him with the guillotine from guard or something. But but that's the guillotine. What a fundamental, like
Yeah.
that's. I was watching old fight showing some of my students Jeremy Horn versus Shale Sonnen, UFC 62, and just watching Horn do like sit up sweep, scoot back, wrap for guillotine. No, that's not there. Kimura, break posture triangle. Like it was just basic
Yeah,
fundamental.
that's like a seminar of fundamental class jujitsu, right? Like
Yes.
that's all shit you show it to white belts in their first year or so.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's amazing. Um, yeah, just you were talking about the guillotine, and it made me think the other day, like that was the most recent submission I hit. Actually, was just a basic guillotine from guard,
Yeah.
and it's a good kid too. The kid's tough. Looking at brown belt pretty soon, probably, and yeah, I just snatched him up in a guillotine, and I was like, he's 22, I'm 44. This is my chance to end this, and he's gonna die here. And got a guillotine on him, and he sat up. He's like, that was really tight. I'm like, okay, good. Just I was exhausted. So yeah, you try to keep up with these younger guys. It's fun. Uh, but yeah, it's just the fundamentals, man. They just change you. It's like just like Hickson and then that story with the UPA. It's all those things. Like even if you lasso guard sweep someone, Marigali style sweep someone to their back, right? Now you got their arm, you've got to be able to finish an armbar. if however you got there might be as fancy as it can be, but in the end, you've got an arm and you've got to have your fundamentals locked in.
100%.
So
So, kind of last thing here to chat with you about. This has been a great conversation. I don't want to monopolize
hey,
your whole afternoon, but thanks for sitting down. But like, where are you at with? I sit down and talk jujitsu on this podcast with a lot of different people. I actually just realized I have Scott's hat on here.
oh cool.
Black market kimonos.
Yeah,
Should advertise Scott Burr. But
there you go.
with the sport, right? Like a lot of these Hickson guys I hang out with, like they obviously don't give two shits about the sport. And I competed all through the color belts. I have not competed at black belt. I'm considering doing something like that so soon ish. I was just talking with some of my people today about it. But it's the sport. It's we just had like one of our guys that works here, Kyle Bame. He just took third in the ADCC trials, right, and kind of got screwed on some points. Uh,
Yeah,
and he's black belt. He's an Eddie Bravo guy or a Gio Martinez guy. They ended up moving to Arkansas and trains here. So, but and he fought on ADCC. It's like had super fights against Gordon, all these people, but like he really got screwed on a technicality of someone's interpretation of the sort of vague rules of ADCC. In one of his
yeah. A good friend of mine, David Porter, who's also an avid competitor, says that rule sets build skill sets, right? So like you got to be careful if you're training for sport. Just understand that that's what you're doing, right? Like that this is the game we're playing, and that the anytime. I mean, there's bad calls in every sport there are. People make millions of dollars a game in baseball and get bad calls all the time. So, and those are with refs who are also making a crap ton of money. Most of these refs aren't making very much, if anything at all. Half of them don't know the rules. One of my favorite moments, we were at a Grappling Industries, and I just look across and I see a scoreboard on the other side of the mat that says 7-1, and I don't know how a one point gets scored because the lowest you can get is 2. So I just took a picture of it and I tagged it. I was like, at Grappling Industries, how does this score happen? And Kevin DeVries, God bless him, he just comes on. He goes, "Oh man, I'm sorry." And I'm like, "It wasn't even me. I just wanted you to know it happened. And, you could see what like mat it was on, right? So he knows who he needs to talk to or whatever. And it's like that's going to happen. And I, UFC one or not UFC, the Ultimate Fighter one, the one with that we were talking about earlier. I remember them saying a lot in there. Don't leave it in the judge's hands, right? If when you leave something in the judge's hands or in the ref's hands or whatever, then what happens happens. And I actually just recently competed, and it basically I couldn't make anything happen standing, so I pull guard, try to go straight into a butterfly sweep. The guy does a good job. He bases out, and then just body locks me inside my closed guard. And so I'm like, I mean, he's literally just wrapped around me inside my closed guard. And so like I literally open my hands and feet. I just look up at the ref. I'm like, call Stalin, like I don't say that, but that's kind of the look I give him. And it's like, I guess we're not, and like that's basically where we stay. I managed to separate his hands. I kind of actually a real fundamental self-defense move. I just get underneath his chin and, frame him off of me, try to shove him into a triangle choke. Doesn't work. We're both big guys. And then we kind of run out of time and that's it. And they give him the match.
Ref's decision.
Yeah, ref's decision. And so I come off the mat and I'm disappointed with my performance, right? Like man, I should have just let him pass and tried to escape, just make something happen, right? Rather than playing in closed guard where, maybe I'm stalling, maybe he's stalling, who knows? And my guys were like, you got screwed, you got screwed. And I said, listen, I let the ref decide. That was my mistake. Like, so that's part of it that I look at is like, anytime you're going to let someone else decide who wins, then you can't complain about what decision they make. I mean, like that sucks when it doesn't go your way or if they miss a call or whatever. But these aren't really professional refs. They're not really, they're just there for the weekend, and maybe they're making $200 to work like 12 hours of
all day,
refing.
or maybe
Yeah, and how many matches did they watch and get lulled to sleep in before they got to yours? Yours is the one that matters to you, but the other 77 that they've seen leading up to that also happened. Um, as far as broader looking at it as the sport, I think that we do much more sport in jiu-jitsu than we like to admit. Um, I think the first year to year and a half of what we do is a lot of self-defense. At least in my fundamentals, it is. You learn how to defend punches. You're training with guys who really aren't that skilled, so you can get away with a lot of real fundamental stuff. And you see what it's like to grapple with guys who don't know what they're doing. Maybe if like you have an MMA program, so you do some striking and stuff, and that's obviously even closer to self-defense than just pure grappling. But when it comes down to it, if you and I get on the mat, slap and bump, we're not going to punch each other. We're not going to fish with each other. We're not going to bite each other. No one's going to be hurt when it's going to be cool setup, a great move, you got me. That's the extent of it, and that's very much a sport.
Yeah.
Maybe you and I don't care. I don't know. Maybe we're in a gi and you're like, is it cool if I heel hook you? And I'm like, yeah, I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, though, so some of the rules can change, but we're still very much doing a sport. We're not going to hurt each other or beat each other up or anything. So I think that a lot of jiu-jitsu guys do way more sport than what they pretend they do.
That's a great point, because there's like, unless you're doing combat jujitsu
Right.
or MMA sparring, like, because even, I mean, we have a USA Boxing Club and you get kickboxing, and Bill Wallace, a Superfoot affiliate,
Okay.
trained with him. But and then we even Muay Thai, like that's the stuff we do. But in all the jiu-jitsu classes, we don't. In the fundamentals program, I do teach defense against strikes, right? And
Yeah.
I bring it up almost every time I teach something. If I know something about not getting punched in the face, I'm going to go over it. But that's definitely a great point. Like, well, there's little to no MMA sparring happening, so I don't have anybody fighting MMA right now. It's either boxing or kickboxing or sport jiu-jitsu, and those are all highly stylized sports. You're talking about Pride earlier, and judo. Like judo, the power bomb style slam is dakiaji, is the name of the throw, and they outlawed that super early on because people would do a hikikomi, pull guard, and then the person would slam them and knock them out. And they're like, well, we want to see what happens with that hikikomi for this amount of time. So you can't just slam the person. So they took it out, you know? And but like, remember Rampage Jackson just slamming people in Pride, and there are no soccer kicks in the there. So it's like it's all a sport. Like I can't hit you because you're with my foot because you're on the ground, or I can't pick you up and slam you, but I can in ADCC if I'm in a submission. It's some weird. It's the stylization of sport. There's some weird stuff that permeates in the arts. But that's a great point because most, if not, I would say, unless they're doing MMA, nobody trains with strikes on the ground or
Right.
combat.
Yeah, and I mean sometimes you do, right? Like sometimes my guys we'll calibrate some slaps. We call it calibrating the slap. It's like give your buddy a high five. Okay, you can go harder than that. Pretty good. Way too hard. Don't hit me in the face like that, please. You know what I mean? And okay, so that and you can keep each other honest. Like, but the minute that comes into it, a lot of the finesse of jujitsu goes right out the window because like the finesse is in me like, oh, I can grab his gi just so, and he's going to bring his hand up, and then I can get my ribs behind the arm, and then now his arms try. But like the minute I can just punch you in the face, your arms go like this. It's much easier to get you in an arm bar, right? like jujitsu's way easier if I can just punch you in the face.
100%. 100.
So that's a thing there that I always point out, and yeah, and all of our and I think any school worth their salt probably does the same thing. Their fundamentals curriculum probably covers some basic defenses against punches from the guard, from standing, all that kind of stuff. Blocking, clinching up, that kind of thing, taking them down. But then once you get outside of that, it becomes, hey, we both know jujitsu, and I want to tap my buddy out. Like Jim has got me with a triangle choke 3 times this week, and I want to get out of that and then get him. So what do I do next? And that's a sport, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. I think that we have to admit there's nothing wrong with that. We all love it. That's why we're doing it. We like the chess game of it. Um, and there's also nothing wrong with if you don't like that, always doing it with gloves on. Like there's some guys that that's how they say they train. That's all they ever want to do. They don't ever want to. I have some police officers who they're not interested in like some of the tornado guards and lasso guards and stuff like that. And I love all of it, but like they're just not interested because it doesn't apply to what they have to do in real life. I always say that the people who really actually get to use jujitsu for self-defense are mostly bouncers and police officers.
Mm-hmm.
They're the ones who actually have to take someone who might try to kill them and control them. The rest of us get to do it in relative safety. So it's just a different look at it, but the same techniques for the most part apply, control a body the same way regardless. And you can just have more fun doing what we do, I think. Like I feel like we have the luxury because I'm not an officer. I don't have to actually do this every day, against somebody that's actually trying to hurt me. I have the luxury of playing with a lasso guard and a Marigali sweep because it's not going to be a waste of my time. Like I can let a guy get up and get back on top of me because I'm not going to die as a result. So on our black belt certificate, though, one of the things it talks about is that you're proficient in what I call the 4 pillars of jujitsu, and the 4 pillars of jujitsu are self-defense, no-gi jujitsu, gi jujitsu, and MMA. I think those are the 4 parts where you see jujitsu used, and you should know how to use it, at least at a rudimentary level for each of those if you're a black belt. I think it's almost impossible to get to black belt without being somewhat familiarized with all of those. I mean, I just haven't seen it happen yet.
No, that's a great point. Great point. In that same sort of remark, it's funny because we are like super interested in this as a society, and you go back to like the Roman games. It's always been a thing, but I found this somewhat recently in some research I was doing. In Aristotle's Ethics, there is a passage where he's like, "Oh well, everybody knows there's no applicability to this fighting we're doing. It's because of the Iron Age. Like, of course, like we have iron weapons. Why would we still do this? Because it's awesome. Like it's just kind of like he just found this other angle, and he's like, but that man, think like what I've been telling our people is I was like, even in the age of nuclear weapons, we are still caught up in this. You go all the way back to 300s BCE, Aristotle, Plato. They're saying the same sort of stereotypical, like, oh well, yeah, he's got a sword, so you'd probably die. Like when we were talking about earlier, it's like, does he have a knife or gun? I wonder. That's always a question on, like, if I'm gonna fight this guy, I'm like, what if he's got a knife or a gun? Like that's always in the back of my head. And they were like, basically, like, what if he's got a battle axe or something. But it's like even in the age of nuclear weapons, we're just totally, as a society, fascinated by this, and it's just a recurrent thing and reinvented thing in successive generations. It's always pulled me.
I mean, at best, we're a bunch of hairless apes, right? and, and if you watch apes, they love to wrestle.
Yes.
So we're kind of the same way.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, the apes, little kids. You put two little kids over together, they're gonna start wrestling. My dog just got a new puppy. His name is Henzo. His
Awesome.
brother and sister's names are Hickson and Gracie. So I told Hickson that I named my dogs after him in the first private I did with him, and he looked at me and he goes, "You motherfucker!" I was just like, "Yep, yes, sir." It was funny. I emailed him a picture of him later. I was like, "There's the sister." It's like, yeah, he was joking around, but it was funny. Yeah. Well, man, it's been an awesome conversation. I have like several times. Yeah, I just see people and I'm like, man, I would like to talk to that guy, and I had been thinking about reaching out to you, and glad I did. So it's been.
I appreciate you having me on, man. Like I said, I'm nobody special, but I appreciate it. I love how small our community is and how we're all connected. So
Yeah, man.
thank you for having me.
Well, keep coming with your jujitsu and supplement recommendations, and perhaps you
Okay,
know
we'll do.
I'll be drawn in by them. So thanks so much, man. I'll shoot you a link and stuff. Go ahead if you have like any, like your website or social media, or if anybody wants to contact you for whatever. You got anything you want to plug here at the end?
Yeah, sure. I mean, my YouTube page, always looking for subscribers there. It's just top level jujitsu. You can probably search that. You can probably search Professor's Corner. That's what I do the most. It's real similar, like what Chewy does. It's just my thoughts on things, little interviews with guys, like 20-minute little snippets. And then toplevelmartialarts.com is my school's website. If you're ever in the area, I love visitors. So I don't really charge a fee. Just leave us a Google review if you come in. And yeah, that's about it, man. So we're in Cuyahoga Falls, Ohio. So
All right, man. Well, if I'm ever in the neighborhood, I will be one of those people dropping in. Maybe I can double up and see Scott Burwell in town or in the
yeah,
area. So
if he's in the area, it's him or then Jason. Jason's one of his black belts. So
and they're doing a custom gi for us right now. Also, I've been going back and forth with them on the designs. So I bought a gi when he was coming through, or he brought me one to California because I brought a couple of white gis with me, but one of them, like one of my workers, like bleached my pants, and I was just like, damn. So I wanted to take a third gi with me, so I had him bring me one. I was like, okay, this is great. But I really like their gis, and a couple of my guys have bought one, so I was like, well, shoot, they're doing these custom ones, and they've been designing this one, so we'll be dropping it here pretty soon.
that's awesome. Yeah, I've never had their geese. I'll have to look into it. I'll hit him up. I'd like.
Yeah,
I've trained with him a lot. I know him, so I should hit him up and be using his stuff.
yeah. Well, that same way, man. I'm like, if I'm gonna support somebody's brand, the guy that ran War Tribe used to live right over here in Oklahoma and moved to Oregon.
Okay.
And I still will interact with him a little bit online, but man, I hadn't seen him in over 5 years. I competed against him at purple belt, you know. But that they sponsored my wife when she was fighting too, but that just like that relationship's not really there. And man, if I'm going to support somebody, it's going to be my friends and family and what they're doing.
Yeah,
So
for sure.
yeah.
All
Well,
right. Well, thank you so
yeah,
much.
man. Thank you. Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon, man. We'll have to do this again someday.
All right. Just let me know how to watch the video.
I will, man. I'll shoot it your way.
Thanks. Bye.